this session. So starting out today, we are looking at the accounting budget screen. This is where we go to input budgets for the different associations that you manage. So when you land on the accounting budget screen, you're going to see the last association that you have selected. And so in this case, I can see that I'm looking at the budget screen for Presidential Valley POA. And so on this budget screen, I can see all of the line items or the budget line items that I have already created for Presidential Valley POA. For those of you that are about to start working on budgets on newer associations, you may have to go in and add different GLs if you don't see those GLs available, but most of you that are going to be entering budgets are doing those for associations that we already have this GL information for. So in Presidential Valley, it's kind of a unique case because I may need to go in and add lines for different GL accounts that I want to track through my budget. So in this case, before we get started, I wanted to show you a few very key important things about this budget screen. So the first thing that you'll notice on this little top bar here is you can select different funds that you want to produce a budget for. So in this case, I've got my operating selected, but you'll notice when I click this drop down, I've got a couple of other different funds within this association that may correspond to different cost centers or neighborhood funds and that sort of thing. So if I wanted to produce a budget for my reserve account, I would select reserve. And this would allow me to build a budget for my reserve account. So you can have budgets for operating and reserve and those different neighborhood funds if you want. But in this case, let's go back to operating. So I just want to build a pretty basic budget here. The next setting that you'll notice is the fiscal year. So this fiscal year is going to indicate what fiscal year that you're producing this budget for, right? So in this case, I can see I'm producing this budget for the 2019 fiscal year. All right, so if I'm about to start working on my 2020 budget, I'm going to want to select 2020 as my fiscal year so that way I can start building my 2020 budget. Now, flipping back to 2019 real quick, one thing that you're going to notice is that your 2019 budgets are going to show a status of approved. Once that status is approved, you do not have the ability to make any changes to this 2019 budget without the appropriate role securities. So if I go into this screen, notice I'm clicking on these different cells. I don't have the ability to input any other values here because my budget's already been approved. It's kind of locked down, right? If I needed the ability to make changes to my 2019 budget, I would need the appropriate securities that give me this unapproved budget button, right? This unapproved budget button is currently only available to your accountants. So if any of you are a manager and you need to make changes to your 2019 budget, because those are already locked down, you will need to reach out to your accountant for that access, okay? So let's go take a look at our 2020 budget. I'm going to select 2020, and then here we'll notice that the status is set to approved. So that lets me, or to proposed, that lets me know I can still make edits. So to make edits, for example, let's say I want to update our assessment income for 2020, and let's say that I'm projecting 450,000. Notice I can click in this field and type in 450, 123 for 450,000, and then hit enter. And then that updates my budget figure for assessments to $450,000. Okay, this little green triangle here lets me know that I have unsaved changes. So I want to make sure to save my changes after I apply them. Then the next thing that you'll notice is once I make a change to this annual field, that amount gets spread evenly over 12 months. Notice I have 450,000 as my annual, and I've got 37.5 for each individual month. So if I go and I update my budget to 500,000, for example, notice how all of those monthly totals update. For those items, such as maybe landscaping concerns, where you don't want your costs spread evenly over 12 months, because you might have higher landscaping expenses in the summertime, you do have the ability to go in and override that monthly spread on an individual level. So let's say in June, I'm expecting things are going to be about $1,000 for landscaping, in July, $1,500. Notice over here that this annual amount changes when I hit enter. See that? So as I update my monthly amount, my annual amount is going to automatically update for me. So if I change this to 200, my annual amount is going to change. So you can either go in and enter an annual amount, which is going to be spread evenly over all 12 months, or you can build out the monthly totals that you want to use based on prior figures, and those will all sum total to add up to your annual figure. So let's take that concept, for example. If I am going through and I'm wanting to build my budget based on last year information, I might want to review my actual GL amounts for each of those periods. So if I click this little drop-down menu next to my GL for postage and supplies as an example, I can see the 2019 actuals for each month for that GL. So I can see that I had this amount in February and I had no other costs throughout the rest of the year. Well, I might want to then update this budget to have my maybe $3,500 in February, and then I can remove those amounts for every other month. So I can reference my last year's actuals and my last year's budgets in determining what I want to do for my next upcoming budget. And again, all I do is I click on this little drop-down arrow next to the GL that I want to view those prior amounts for. And then this prior year tab is going to show us all of the actuals and the budget amounts for each of those periods. Again, for water and sewer, if I wanted to see my total for water and sewer, looks like I didn't have any actuals for water and sewer in this association for that GL. So if we're going through and we need to add a GL, because let's say I don't see all the GLs that I need listed in my budget here, we'll click on this little new GL button. When I click new GL, this works much in the same way that we're already used to when we're coding our invoices. We go in and we just start typing in the name of the GL. So if I have maybe a utility GL, or if I have some other GL, I can go search for those, or I can go through and select the GL that I want to build my budget line item for. Maybe I want to build one for legal. So let's go ahead and set up a legal GL. What I like to recommend is when you're setting up your legal GL, if you already know, or any GL, I should say, not just your legal, right? But if you're going and you're setting up a GL, I recommend saving your changes before you start adding other amounts. So I added my legal GL, and the reason that I like doing that is because you'll notice that once I added a GL and I hit save, it tucked that GL under the appropriate category. So notice how it tucked it under repairs and maintenance expenses. By saving it, you're going to put the GL in the appropriate grouping. So as you're filling out your GLs, it's within the group that you're used to, right? And then now that it's in that grouping, as I enter my information, I can see totals for that group. So if I wanted to compare my income, for example, my $500,000 against all of my expenses, I can see a sum total of all of my expense amounts here, and that lets me know maybe how much of a budget I have to play with. Because you can see $18,083.31 is my total expense amount for repairs and maintenance expenses. $7,200 is my total for grounds, and that totals $25,283.31 as my total expense amount for that annual period. All right, so let me stop there real quick. I see I've had a couple questions come in. Let me make sure I get those addressed. Okay, yeah, I'll be glad to show you that real quick, BJ. All right, so I'm in Presidential Valley, and let's say I need to add another GL for this association. Click on this new GL button. I can go start typing in the name of my GL, or if I just want to scroll through and search, maybe I have, let's see, do I have any other landscaping? I've got a contract landscape maintenance. That's a good one. So what I like to do is, again, once I add my GL, I hit save changes. That's going to pull contract landscape maintenance, that GL I've added, into the appropriate grouping down here. And then now I can go in and say, all right, maybe my total amount for the year is $5,000, or maybe I want to spread this out differently over the different months. So maybe it's going to be $500 this month. Maybe it's going to be $500 this month. I'm just tabbing through. $500 this month. Maybe we don't have any charges in May, none in June. And it really, what I want to show you here is you can't enter things on the monthly level, and that will sum total your annual amounts appropriately. So I got one more question here. Okay, so if you've added a GL by mistake, you scroll over to the right-hand side. So I'm just scrolling over, scrolling, and then I can delete. So if I said, oops, I should not have added that contract landscape maintenance, I just hit delete. Yes, I want to delete, and we'll make sure our changes are saved. It's a really good question. Let's see what other questions we got here. Why didn't it pull to the grounds expense category? That is based on the GL groupings for this Presidential Valley. And it's probably a mess because it's a test association. Everyone gets in there and changes with things. So it just depends on the GL grouping. So if you want to know how your GLs are grouped, if we go to association, GL accounts, and then GL groups, this is where we define what grouping those charges are going to live in. And so, for example, repairs and ground, or repairs and maintenance expenses is every GL from $5,000 to $56.99. Let me know if that does not make sense, whoever submitted that from Charlotte. All right, Nicole, that's another really good question. Is there a reason that January is at the end after December? That's an awesome question. So accounting budget, let's go back and look at that. So what Nicole's pointing out here is that notice our fiscal year is starting with February instead of January, right? That is based on the association's fiscal year that we define on the association settings. So this budget screen is going to be based on the fiscal year that you use. So most associations are going to start with January on that screen. So I bet if you go into one of your associations, Nickel, provided that they use a standard fiscal year, you'll see that it starts with January instead of February, but that's purely just based on the fiscal year that's set up for that association. And let me know if that doesn't make sense. All right. How change the GL description, but keep the same GL code. All right. So when you're in this budget screen, you're selecting from the GLs that have been defined on your chart of accounts. So if you need to change a description for one of your GLs, you need to make that change on your association GL accounts page. That would be a conversation you need to have with your accountant. You can't use different descriptions on this budget for the exact same GL code without setting up those GLs on the association's chart of accounts. And if you have more questions on that, definitely let me know. I'd be glad to walk through what you're trying to do there, Ben. All right, those are really awesome questions, you guys. Before I move on, do you guys have any other questions on what I've gone over so far, or anything else you want to see before I go to the next point? All right. All right, so let's see here. All right, so this screen is not showing projections, Nicole. So this screen will not show projections. This is showing prior budgeted, prior actuals, prior variance, and then future budget amounts for the GLs that you've identified. And then to answer your question, BJ, to go back to the screen, we go to accounting, we go to budget. By building out our budgets on this screen, all of the reports that we pull will be referencing from this screen. So if we build our budgets into this screen, we're already a step ahead in our process because we've got all of the information already in our budget screen. Furthermore, by building out in this screen makes it really easy for you to go back and reference the amounts from prior years because you've got it all filled out right here. Other things to look at on this screen before we move on. So we talked about our priors. We talked about our different fiscal years. Let's take a look at, as I'm building this budget, if I want to go back and do some research on maybe some GL to try to figure out exactly what I should set my budget for this period, I can see, I've got these actuals here, but maybe I want to get a little bit more information. There are a few reports that we can run that can be really helpful for you in determining and building your budget. And I wanted to show you guys a couple of my favorites. Now, Cathie is going to jump in a little bit later and kind of walk you guys through the process and that sort of thing. And she may have some reports that she likes better. But a lot of the reports, or a lot of the people that I work with, really like using this GL trial balance by groups when they're producing their budgets. Because what this GL trial balance by groups report is, if you haven't looked at it yet, is this report allows you to define for a specific time frame the specific GLs that you want to research at the same time. So if I'm building my budget and I want to look at maybe my landscaping information, I might want to pull my GL trial balance for tree maintenance and landscape contract and all of my different landscaping GLs. So I can review for that period, maybe all of last year or for specific months, what transactions hit each of those GLs. So that way I can then come back in and build my GL information appropriately. So this GL trial balance by groups is really, really helpful. It allows you to select for a specific range, either a group of GLs or specific GLs that you want to review. So that is one of my favorites. And then we have income statement with codes is another really helpful one. And I think most of you have seen this report. I just want to make sure that you guys are aware. And one reason that this income statement with codes is nice is it's showing you your year-to-date actuals and budgeted amounts for the specific GLs. And then it's also giving you the specific GL code for each of those items. So that can be a really helpful report for you to pull. And then another thing that doesn't get talked about too frequently, but I want to make sure those new folks of you are aware, if you want to pull your income statement and your GL trial balance and your balance sheet, you can pull and look at 3 different reports all at the same time. Now, if you're only working on one screen, that makes it a little bit tough, but especially those of you that have those dual window or those dual monitors, you can jump in and pull your income statement with codes. And then if you want to look at your GL trial balance side by side to that, You go search for your GL trial balance by groups, and then instead of hitting run, you hit new window. Then you can pull and look at your income statement and your GL trial balance side by side. So that functions just the same way as our browser settings do, where you go to do like Control T for a new tab or Control N for a new window. Instead of reloading the report into the same report viewer, you can load multiple reports at the same time. That makes it really helpful when we're producing our budgets. So let's stop there real quick. Looks like I had a few more questions file in here. Let's see. Unbudgeted expenses year to date. How do we get them to show in the 2020 budget? Good question. So if you have unbudgeted expenses year to date, you are going to want to make sure that you add them to your 2020 budget. So you're going to go to your accounting budget screen again, just to refresh how we get back to that screen. And then from this budget screen, you want to add a new GL for your 2020 amounts for those items. So that way they are no longer unbudgeted items and you've got budget totals for those. All right, looks like got another question here. Okay, and then yeah, again, to get to this page, we go to accounting and then budget. Once we get to the budget screen, just a quick recap for those of you that were late joining in. We're going to select the fund that we want to produce our budgets for. Most of you are just going to be producing budgets for operating, but you can produce budgets for reserves if you need to. And then you're going to select the fiscal year. So all of you guys are going to show your 2019 fiscal years as approved. So you go into your 2020 budget, and then this is how you make changes to your 2020 budget. If I need to add a new GL, click the new GL button. I add my GL. Maybe I want to add some water and sewer GL. Looks like I've already got that one. Do I have a utility GL? Let's do one for something random like bad debt expense. So let's say that we're going to assume $10,000 in bad debt this year. So we'll go ahead and make that a budget item. Hit save changes. And then after you save changes, notice that that GL gets tucked under the appropriate grouping. And then to make changes to the amounts, you just click in the field, everyone. So if I want to make a change to the April budgeted amount for assessments, for example, because I assume I'm going to get a lot more in April, I can make that 50,000 here. I hit enter. This little triangle shows me I have unsaved changes. I'll go in and save those changes. All right. Does this work like Excel where we can add comments on any cell? Another awesome question. You're beating me to the punch here today. Notice this notes section, everyone. I've got notes here. Assessment income will increase this year because we have raised the assessment amount and because our owners have all agreed to pay on time. Wouldn't that be nice? I'll add some comments there, save changes. Maybe I want to leave a comment on bad debt. We are projecting 10,000 in bad debt because of a prior owner who is refusing to pay legal expenses. So I'm just adding notes here. It's really, really helpful to add these notes. If you guys go back into previous periods, so let's fast forward to 2020. Let's jump in our time machine for a second. If I'm in 2020, I'm preparing my 2021 budget. I've got my notes here from when I was building my 2020 budget that I can reference when I'm building my 2021 budget, and you can kind of build on that concept, right? So these notes are going to be saved on this budget screen. So if you come back to reference, well, why did I increase the budget amount for bad debt this year? Oh, that's right. There's my note from last year on why I did that thing. And then as you go to produce reports, some of our reports are going to pull into the budget reports that you produced to answer your question, Ben. So if we go to reports, depending on what type of report it is that you pull, so let's talk about our budget reports real quick. We've got a few different budget reports. So if you guys go to reports as the menu item, select your association, and then in report, just type in budget and hit enter. That'll filter all of your available reports to just your budget reports. And then you can go in and see, like maybe let's pull a proposed annual budget, for example. I can pull that proposed annual budget and see, my budgeted amounts and that sort of thing. I'm trying to remember which reports are actually pulling in those notes. I don't think that one is pulling in my notes. I don't think any of these canned reports are pulling in your notes, but that then brings me to the next topic. When you've built your budget, and it's a lot easier to just build your budget in here if you have that ability. And then once you get all of your expenses kind of finalized with what you're going to build in here, if you need to go and start, using formulas to calculate different things, get your budget built first with all of your expenses that you want to budget. Then what you can do is you can export this information from this budget screen. And exporting budgets into Excel really work the best from our accounting budget screen, right? So notice this little export to Excel button here. You can export our other budget reports, but the formatting is not going to be as advanced as it is on this particular export, right? So now our intent is for you to be able to build your budget, do everything that you need to do in Vanica, and then produce reports straight out of Vanica, so that way you never have to export anything into Excel. But if you do have that need to export things into Excel to build out formulas and build out different things like that, using the export from the budget screen is really the best way to go, because it's formatted a little bit better than the way our Excel exports for our different reports work. And then you'll also notice those notes come through as well, right? So again, accounting, budget, we have that export to Excel button. That really is the cleanest Excel export for budgets. So let's stop there. Looks like I got a couple questions here. All right. Do we need to adjust another month if we increased 1 month? Not necessarily. So I guess I don't know that I fully understand your question, Sue, but if I'm going into my legal expenses, and right now I can see I've got nothing for legal so far. If I decide at first that my legal expenses should be $5,000, but then I realize I'm not going to have any, I don't want to have any budgeted amounts for these months, but I want to budget $1,000 for this month, notice my annual amount has changed. So really, if you want to keep your annual amount the same, as you're going through and making these adjustments, you will want to make sure that you make the appropriate monthly adjustment, so that way it adds back up to $5,000. I think that's what you're asking me, Sue, but let me know if that doesn't answer your question. Let's see. If we have an expense in 2019 that we didn't have a budget for, but show an expense for and have created a code, since it is pulling in June financials, if the code was created and there is an expense before in June, will the line item show up with the expense so that we can budget for 2020? So yes, that is going to show up in your reporting, but that is not going to automatically be created on this budget screen. And so that kind of goes back to Ben's question earlier. If you guys have unbudgeted amounts from a previous year that you want to include in your upcoming budget, this budget screen does not automatically create the GLs. You guys create those GLs. So if you're looking at your income statement and you see a line item that was not included in your budget, because maybe you pulled your income statement with codes and it's showing those variances there, you will want to go back into this budget screen and make sure that you add that as a line item for that next coming year. And then your question, Kathleen, is actually probably going to be better addressed by Cathie. So let's see if we have any other questions, because as far as the process goes, it is a lot quicker to just set things up in this budget screen and then produce your budget reports, but it just kind of depends on if you need to be able to produce things in Excel, why you're producing things in Excel. So that would actually be a perfect opportunity to pass the conversation over to Cathie to just kind of talk about her experience, what works for her, and then about this process that Cam's is going to be using. All right, so are you still with us, Cathie? Let me go ahead and I'm going to have to unmute. Let's see, bear with me just a second, Cathie. I had everyone muted there. All right, Cathie, you should be unmuted.
Right. Hello, everybody.
All right, awesome. Now, I did keep everyone muted, Cathie. If there are questions that come in, if you could see them in the chat feature, you can address them, or I'll be more than glad to type responses back. And then once you finish going over what you want to go over today, if you want to open the floor, just let me know and I can unmute everyone and we can turn this into a more conversational format.
Great. Thank you, BD.
Awesome, for sure.
So today I wanted to take a few minutes just to go through the changes in the process and some time frames, just to point out some more additional information. Thank you, BD, for showing us how to create a budget worksheet in Vanica. This session is recorded. There's also an excellent video that is embedded in some instructions you'll be mailed, in the process, and it's on the invitation as well. I have Jessica Henry with me today too, so we'll more or less tag team when she has something to add. But let's talk about some 2020 budget preparation process changes that we wanted to bring to your attention. The procedure uses Vantica as well as Excel. As BD just explained, you're going to create your budgets in Vantica, but then export it into Excel to submit it, and we'll go through that. We're also going to talk for a few minutes about the time frame of budget preparation, because that is so important. And as BD mentioned, we do want to provide opportunities for you to ask questions as well. There are resources available. Today's recording of our Fireside chat. We'll be having an opportunity for you to join a budget workshop where I will actually create a budget worksheet and go through the whole process for you. And then your regional manager is a good resource for you. And that video that AJ made actually last year or the year before that does a great job of explaining the process as well. So don't hesitate to use any of those resources available. And then I'm also available as a resource. So our goal is always to provide at least 2 weeks notice of an assessment that's due to the members. In order to do that now, because of the size of the company, it is necessary for your budgets to be submitted in November. So anyone that has been with CAMS particularly for a number of years, you'll want to note that accelerated due date for budgets. North Carolina statutes require ratification of a budget by the membership unless the documents state otherwise, but South Carolina doesn't have that requirement. So in the process you'll be emailed, you'll see it states if ratification is required or if only board approval is necessary. One of the main reasons we try to specify the difference there is the difference in statute requirements. It is always necessary, as we say consistently, look at the association documents too. Don't just go by the statute. So let's take a look at our ideal time frame for budget submission. By September 1st, it's a good goal for any of those associations that do not require ratification by the membership to have those budgets to the board for their consideration and approval. 60 days prior to a meeting where the budget's going to be considered, that budget does need to be approved by the board. And that's so 45 days prior to that meeting, you can send your meeting package to the mailroom, which will go to the quality control manager, who will then send it to the mailroom for processing. And we just want to allow a lot of time. We don't want to assume that you're going to send an annual meeting package on the 20th and it's going to get mailed on the 21st or 22nd. Build in a good 7 to 15 days time for it to go through the process, because it's important to remember you're not the only manager that is sending something to that quality control manager for review. And then we do try to mail the annual meeting package to the membership 30 days prior to the meeting. And it's important to note some documents actually require that 30-day notice. And then 3 days after your meeting where a budget's been ratified, you want to step your budget to approved and start the billing process. Budgets that don't require ratification by the membership can be approved by the board, and that again is often in South Carolina. So let's shoot for that November 1st again, okay? We can't state that enough. November 1st is your ideal for that. It's important to note budgets received after December 1st will be billed the middle of January. So if your association habitually has had an annual meeting in December where they have ratified their budget, try to get them to move that date up to November. And some of them, I know they've been doing it for 20 years, but we just want to meet the goal of their assessment billing being processed in a timely manner. And the only way to ensure that assessment billing is going to occur in a timely manner is for those budgets to have been received in November. So association has their annual meeting December 14th, and you cannot convince them to change that meeting date so you can meet the mailing deadline. Then they just need to understand the consequence of that is that mailing may not get out until the middle of January. We have a new process for tracking the status of budget preparation. Many of those, and I've distributed this to numerous managers even this year, we've used a spreadsheet to track the budget through the process. We've got a proposed budget draft, we've sent it to the board, and we've always gone back to this spreadsheet and checked the boxes or entered a date when that particular step was finished for each association. Well, now we can do that through Vantica, and we're going to take a look at that action item on how to do that. So we're going to track the budgets, and we're going to send them to the various parties involved in a budget approval, and we're going to send it for billing setup all through this one action item. It's important to attach the approved budget to the action item. We create the budget in Vantica as a worksheet, then we export it into Excel, and then we attach that Excel. So that's why it's important to create a budget report like BD showed a moment ago, or create it in Excel so we can attach it to that action item and get it through the process. We also want to complete and attach the billing form to the action item. And we're going to actually send that form out for you to look at again today when you received a copy of today's process that we're discussing. I don't know how well you can see this long list of steps involved in this action item, and we're going to break it out. So again, this is a new process through Vantica that allows for tracking and then ultimately billing of assessments. Step number 1 of this action item is board review. So you've gone into Vantica, created your worksheet, and you've either created a report, as BD mentioned a bit ago, or you've exported it to Excel, which you'll attach to this action item, and it'll go to your board just like any other report you would send. The next step, they can send a reply to the manager, or they can step it to board approved, or the manager can step it to board approved. In an association that doesn't require membership ratification of the budget, then you can step it once you have that board approval to final budget approved, post to the documents page. Or if the board's approved a budget and you're waiting on the meeting, you'll want to step it to pending budget ratification. Then once you've gone through and it's been approved, that final approval step, your next one is the assessment setup needed. And this is where that step is going to go to AR so that they're going to kick into motion billing for the 2020 assessment amounts. The next step, they're going to see that the budget setup is needed. Then it'll go, that goes to the accountant to actually set up the budget. And they will do a review of the budget. Jessica has
it's important to note that the accountant has the ability to approve the budget in the system in that worksheet that you're working in. So they will review if you didn't use the worksheet and used an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, then they will go through and make sure that information is in there, and then they will approve it in the system.
Okay, so that's budget setup needed is for your accountant. If there's additional info needed, that goes back to the manager for more information. Then it goes into the billing where AR is going to step it to the billing is generated. They send that a snippet of the bill, the statement set up, or coupon proof for the manager to approve. So it's important to know that bill is not going out, folks, until the manager steps it to billing approved. Then if the billing requires adjustment, the manager is going to step it to number 11 versus number 10, right? And then we go into our completed steps. Coupons are ordered, coupons are mailed, statements are sent, eco-billing, and then there's also the option, step number 16 is reply to AR. So those are all the steps involved. And again, use this action item so that you can track the progress of your budgets. Regional managers can check the process.
You'll get notified once the coupons are mailed, statements are sent, or the eco billing is completed. Managers will get a notification by email that lets them know that those things have been completed, so you'll know when they actually get sent out. And then the whole purpose of this is transparency. The action item is at the association level. Regional managers will have the ability to pull reports and to see what process, where we are in the process. Transparency between the manager and our AR billing specialist to know what's happened so far if we're waiting on coupons from South Data. And then also transparency in our CS department to know when they get calls from homeowners, if, for instance, they're pending ratification and that annual meeting has moved, if the manager notates that when they step to that step, then the community support team will be able to properly educate the homeowner about that delay.
Great. So it's also helpful as a manager to be able to go in and pull a report to see the status of your budgets as well. It is so important, like Jessica just mentioned, anything we can communicate through Vantica, the customer support team can handle questions from members for us, whether it's an email or a phone call. So you always want to keep in mind during this busy season of the year to update meetings and additional information to actually include a meeting date. So if you know your association is having their 2019 annual meeting December 14th, go put that under additional information so that when a homeowner calls in and says, hey, when's our annual meeting, the call center can answer that question for you. Assessment info is something else that you want to update at this time of year. And then realtor info. Realtor info is where you will actually plug in the amount of the assessment for 2020. So don't forget to do that, okay? We also want to use standard file name for budgets. It will be association name 2020 approved budget. So please make it a point to use that. Again, our goal is to standardize. We also recommend that you do a cover letter to accompany each one of your budgets. So when you go create that action item to send it to the board, you'll attach the budget, the report of the budget, and you'll also want to put a copy of this cover letter. And it's just a way to summarize for the board. You know, just like our variance reports, we want a quick summary of, hey, this is what I've done, this is what's changing for next year, here's what we expect the assessments to be. And under assess expenses, we suggest that don't worry about noting every single line item that's changed, but address the changes for the different categories, GL categories. For administrative or repairs, maintenance, just talk about how that's changed from year to year. Don't worry about postage change $20, insurance change $50. Lump it together into the GL groups. The billing specialist begins the billing process based on the association's billing preferences. So we all know we want to shoot for eco billing, right? And we want to push owners to sign up for ACH. You'll get more information from that anytime you want it, and it's also included in this process that you'll be sent. So we have eco billing, paper statements, and coupons. So in summary, look at the association documents to confirm the time frame. Keep in mind the CAMS time frame. Run any subsidiary reports you need, including that income statement 2 column. That's my very favorite report in Vantica, where you can click on the actual column and it shows you all your transactions for the year. Remember, budgets need to be approved by the boards and ratified by the members in November. Use our budget preparation assessment setup new action item to track and go through the budget process. And then always attach that budget to your action item along with the billing form when you've stepped it to approved. So BD, I'll shoot it back to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Cathie. I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor. So I'm going to unmute all of our participants here so we can open up and have a little bit of dialogue. Let's see here. All right, so everyone is now unmuted. So let's open the floor for conversation. For those of you that did not have a chance to, or maybe we're waiting till the end of the conversation, if you have questions, if you have feedback, now's the time. Does anyone have questions over what we've just gone over, anything that Cathie's covered, anything about this budget process?
BD, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So did Cathie answer my question about transferring it from Vanica to Excel?
So what you're going to want to do, Kathleen, is build your budget in Vantica. And then as you're going through the process, once you need to export it to Excel, that Excel spreadsheet, if that's what you indeed need to do, and it seems like most of you are going to be exporting things and completely building the budget in Vanica, once you export it to Excel, and you finish that budget, that Excel spreadsheet is what you're going to attach to the action item that the accountant is then going to confirm once the process has been approved and completed. And Jessica and Cathie, let me know if I've misspoken on any of that.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yes. And
Are
Kathleen,
there formulas in there? Go ahead.
there are not formulas in an exported Excel spreadsheet. And in the budget workshop, we'll actually go through creating a budget from the budget worksheet to exporting it and attaching it to an XN.
So did you say that in Vanica there's no formulas?
Correct.
Well, let me clarify that. Let me clarify that for everyone. There are formulas in Vantica, and that's one of the reasons that we want to get you to build out your budget in Vantica, because it's going to help alleviate a lot of those little concerns that we've seen about people not summing their columns correctly or not adding everything up in the way that they need to. So there are formulas on this screen, but we only have a sum formula. So that's the only formula we're using on this screen. And what I mean by that is this. So we looked at, if I wanted to update one of my monthly amounts, notice it's spread evenly, 416.67 over the entire year. If I wanted to update one of these amounts to 1,000, for example, and I need to go into my 2020 budget to edit my budget. If I want to go in and edit one of these amounts, let's say I edit this to 10,000. Notice how this annual column over here increased, right? So there is a formula, right? I'm summing all of these to equal this annual amount. The other formula works the other way, and that is if I say I just want to have a $500 annual amount, that then and performs that division calculation divided by 12 across each of these months. So any formulas beyond that, you will need to use Excel to complete. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes. BD, this is Sue. My computer's being weird. I can't see the answer to my chat. I know they said they would send out the notices in 30 days, but I have an association that I know it requires a 45-day notice for annual meeting. Mm-hmm. What do I need to do to make sure that that is a 5-day mail out?
You'll want to get that package to the mailroom 55 days out.
I would always ask that.
Thank you.
Just leave yourself plenty of leeway there.
Hey, BD, this is Mary Helen. I've got a question for you.
Hey, Mary Helen.
So now that you've created your 2020 budget and everything's been approved, does that automatically update your assessment rules?
No, ma'am. So that is one of the reasons that CAMS has gone through the process of building out this budget workflow, is because once that budget gets approved, it's going to advance to a step that assigns the action item to the AR team, so they can then go set up the updated budget based on, or the updated billing based on the budget.
So we don't. Okay. So we don't have, somebody else does.
Yeah, so you guys are not going to go in and update your assessment amounts. You guys are going to input your budget, and then once that budget's been approved, AR sees the action item and gets stepped to them, and they say, all right, I'm going to go do my thing. and then they set that up.
Dee, this is Nicole.
Hey, Nicole.
County puts the budget in.
I was wondering, on this page, where do you see the assessment change? So if you know that your expenses are X amount and you've got 100 owners, where are we seeing that on the page that our assessments need to be X amount?
This page is not calculating based on the number of owners. These are just dollar figures. So we're not calculating a cost per unit or a cost per door on this page. You just enter a flat amount. Go ahead.
Nicole, when I would export that to Excel, that's when I would put my formula in the revenue to determine the assessment per owner.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is actually a good question from the Charlotte office. They're asking if a negative amount will calculate on this page, and I've never had that question. It does look like it will. So if you guys are going through and you're building your reserve budgets and you need to indicate that amount is being decreased over a certain period, you can throw in a credit amount for that period. Not super common that that's going to happen, but that is a really good question. I appreciate that, Charlotte. Awesome. What other questions do you guys have for us today?
This is Leanne. I just wanted to put out there that we want to make sure that an Excel version and a PDF version of the budget are attached to the action item for AR.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. When you guys are going in on the association level to create your action items, so go to all action items, go to that association, go to create your new action item, and then to Kellyanne's point, when you're creating that action item, you're going to want to make sure that you attach the PDF and the Excel version in this attachment section here. Yeah, that's good. What other questions or feedback do you guys have for us today?
Mine is for Cathie. Cathie, you said to go in additional information, put when the annual meeting is.
Yes.
Where do we put that? Under assessments?
You go to a BD showing us now, additional information,
Okay.
meetings.
Meetings, got it.
Annual meeting, put that date.
Got it.
And location.
Thank you.
They want to know where
Oh,
to go.
yes, and location. They do call quite a bit and ask where the meeting is.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good one to get filled out. We get a lot of questions about that once we get into November.
And BD, would you show them the assessments and also the realtor info so they're familiar? So the options there for the billing preference should be eco billing, paper statements, or coupons, depending on your association's preference.
Okay. And then what was the other section you wanted to look at?
Realtor info.
Realtor info. Yeah, that's a good one.
So that's where you'll see the first category is regular assessment amount. Once you know your 2020 assessment, put that in there as 2020 dash assessment amount. I encourage everybody to take time in the next week and go through the process. Take one of your associations, create a budget, if not all of them. Go through, give it a try. We'll be having a budget workshop the following week. So you'll be receiving an invitation about that so that you can actually see what you have questions about. I think you'll see how easy it is to use it.
And then yeah, Stacey Lowell just made a really good point. When you guys go to export from this accounting budget screen, when you export this information, it is exporting into a spreadsheet that is purely just data. So if we go look at this export, there are no formulas in this export. So if you guys are going through and you're exporting this information, you will need to go back through and throw your formulas back in if you're going to be changing information once you export into this format. So for example, notice if I select that annual column, that is a specific dollar amount. If I go in here and try to change that and expect it to do the same thing that my budget screen is doing, where if I change this to 500, it's going to automatically update that annual amount, notice that does not happen. So if you do need to go through and make sure that this is a calculation, you want to do equals sum and then grab your months for that period. So that is a really good point.
BD.
Yes, sir.
On the annual budget comparison report, our negative numbers when we're subtracting from the reserve, it's showing a positive number.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be fixed?
So this report is only showing positive figures?
No. Poll a community that has the real numbers.
Such as?
Well, you can use Cotswold homes, for example.
All right. And while that's loading, let's pull up their budget screen for that. Cotswold. All right. So,
okay, right in the income. See, you've got negative $60,000, but a positive 60,000, so it's overstating our income.
In the actual column.
well, these are actual. Well, those are actual figures.
Right, but it's still it's overstating our total income.
You mean your budgeted income amount?
Right. Not budgeted, actual.
Hmm.
That needs to be a negative number.
Where?
That number, right there, $60,000.
That is an actual amount, right? So this is saying.
But it's overstating our total income for the association.
Mm-hmm. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I'm not sure on that one, Ben. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, but that's an issue for everybody that needs to pull this report.
Less monthly reserves. This is for Cotswold.
That's for everybody.
So let's go look at a different association. Let's go to reports. And let's go to trademark.
So it's a matter of fixing the report.
Because the reserve assessment should be reducing operating income.
Yeah, just like it is for the budget. It should reduce the actual as well.
Oh, because it's adding instead of subtracting there.
Right.
Yep. So it looks like it's just a formula, or it's a change that we need to just let development know about.
Okay.
Thank you, Ben.
Annual budget. Because less monthly reserves is adding instead of subtracting total revenue.
We also had a question that some associations have mid-year end close and budgets have been changed in billing. Is there anything else we need to do? When you do your budget worksheet, it's going to create the worksheet according to the fiscal year that is noted in your settings for that association. So it will automatically pull it, just like BD's report beginnings started in February, that's because their fiscal year started in February.
Right. Yeah, and if any of you are curious as to where you can find your association's fiscal year settings, you go to Association and Settings, and we'll go down towards the bottom. Oh man, they just moved this on me. Where did this move to? Your accountants would probably know. Oh, here we go. Starting month of fiscal year right here under accounting. So we can see that the starting month is February here instead of January. So that's why when we go to accounting budget, we see it starting in February instead of January. All right, well, that's awesome feedback, guys. What other questions do you guys have for us today?
All right. Well, thank you all very much. And thank you so much, BD.
I'll add one more thing for the group.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a CAMS contract, we are working through the fee schedule. And one important note that we won't be calling it fee schedule. Fee is, I guess, a negative term. So we'll be calling it our additional services, and we'll have a price schedule for that. And that will be coming out early next week. There are a couple of key changes I can speak to. I know that I've had several questions. This is that final approval stage, which just means Mike and Dave have to bless it. So what's changed for the coming year as far as for your budgets is that the compliance letters, the violation letters that are going out previously were $10, and for coming up, they will be $2.50 a piece. Certified compliance letters are going to be $10 each. Those are usually those that require a hearing notice. And we were removing, there's a forwarding address, $2.50. We're removing that from the fee schedule. Let's see. And I believe that that is all that's changing. One thing to note, in January 2019, we had added to our fee schedule the ability to charge for the use of non-partner banks, a $35 a month fee to administrate that. And we will begin charging for that for contracts from moving forward after 2019 and forward, and we'll start doing that in 2020, January 2020.
So if you manage an association that uses non-partner bank, you'll want to include in your administrative fees for 2020 $35 a month
to manage
those accounts.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say that one more time, please?
If you have an association that uses non-partner banks, there's a $35 a month per account charge that the association will be billed for starting in 2020. So you want to add that into your administrative costs. And also,
AR could maybe, or accounting, or our accountants could maybe notify us of any associations that are with non-partnered banks.
I mean,
when you say the partner bank,
yeah.
the partner banks are North State Bank, Bank of the Ozarks,
Union Bank and Crestcom.
Union Bank and Crestcom. So if you have an association with accounts anywhere else, each account will have a $35 a month charge beginning in January.
Including reserve accounts?
Yes, yes. And the reason for that is it's more difficult to get the bank statements for those accounts, and if transfers have to be made between accounts, it's not easy. Everything takes longer.
So it makes it more difficult for us to also meet those financial deadlines.
Can you repeat?
Should circulate that letter that went out.
We will, Ben, that's a good point. We'll circulate that with the new fee schedule, just because that is one change that it's not a change, it's just we're actually exercising the right to charge.
And then also remember, everybody, that the CAMS contract, the default is a 3% increase in management fee every year. So you'll want to include that in 2020.
Yeah, and your regional manager would be the only one that can deviate from that 3%. If you need to know specifically in the management agreement summary in Danica, you should be able to see what that specifically is for your associations. One other thing to note just about the compliance letters, we have been charging for the use of materials. So I think most compliance letters are probably $1.50 every time we send them out. Obviously, certified letters are more expensive to send out at cost. So it's really not much of a change, that $2.50. It's just a change in where they will be seeing it, itemized out on their admin billing fees.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for your time today. Good luck with budgets.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great discussion.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.